Chapter 2 of sdm4 concerns itself with the analysis of categorical data. It starts with data from the Titanic, a little dated but still pretty gripping story, and a great way to think about multivariate statistics, which is something we're going to be doing more than two variables at a time. And here there's data provided on the survival status, age, sex, and class of the passengers. So this chapter, much of which will be a review, describes at first how we can summarize a single categorical variable and introduces some rules of data analysis. It introduces the idea of frequency tables. Bar charts are things we aren't going to be using too much in the course, but the SDM examples describe how to use those. Pie charts will be almost never used in the course. For both of these, their data to ink ratio tends to be fairly low. Possible exception when you're comparing pie charts, I still think that the second presentation here is better than the first, and there's really only 15 numbers being displayed. A table might be better. Life gets much more interesting as we start comparing the relationship between two categorical variables, and so that's the subject of section 2.2, and we introduce the idea of a cross-classification or contingency table. There's different ways of displaying that. We'll talk about the idea of something called a mosaic plot in a few minutes. Conditional distributions are a really important idea. The difference between conditional and unconditional is something we're going to be coming back to. So I'd encourage you to pay close attention to that section. Kind of seeing the difference here of the alive and dead is kind of a conditional probability problem. It's a nice example. Encourage you to work through and finding these conditional distributions and interpreting those in words. That's often more challenging than just the calculations. We have kind of side-by-side bar charts. Again, not particularly effective way of presentation. We're going to be moving beyond that pretty quickly. But we can actually start thinking about informal inference in terms of some of these differences and whether or not there's really a substantive difference. The just checkings are always really useful. I would encourage you to kind of be working through these. The answer is given at the back of the book. The step-by-step, this idea of thinking about examples would encourage you to work through each one of the parts of thinking, then showing, and then telling. Those steps of really bringing a question to bear and being able to interpret the results is an important part of what we're going to be doing throughout this semester. So in the same way we've had what can go wrong in terms of just data, we have the same things in terms of our classification tables. And so that merits a close study. Probably one of the most interesting and unusual and actually things that arise in real life is Simpson's paradox. So I would definitely encourage you to focus on these pages, talking about Simpson's paradox and working through these paradoxical examples. You'll have a chance to do that on the homework as well. There's a great problem in the exercise in the recommended problems on the Berkeley paradox. So everything that we're doing then shows up here in terms of some of these learning objectives and the review of terms. It's pretty straightforward to be thinking about how to implement these methods in R. And we have that with the SDM2 materials that are on the website. We can bring in the Titanic data. We use here the tally function to determine the distribution by class. There is a bar chart function. Said won't use that very much. That will give us some bar charts. I think a better way of displaying these data is with a mosaic plot. I encourage you to kind of take a look at that in the materials from the SDM4 and R. And that is the chapter. Happy reading.